was that he recruited very young girls, very young and very impressionable, at a time in their lives when they had identity problems and they didn't know where they were going in society, and society was very strange right then.
For the Manson girls, life outside of society would soon take a strange, hallucinatory turn as they fell under Charles Manson's power. By 1968, Charles Manson's hippie family had grown to a core of about 25 young people. They settled on an abandoned movie set outside of Los Angeles called Spahn Ranch and shared everything from sex to hallucinogenic drugs. Leslie Van Houten. Through Dennis Wilson, Manson met record producer Terry Melcher, the son of Doris Day, and even visited Melcher's estate on Cielo Drive. That estate would later be leased to a young actress named Sharon Tate and her husband, the film director Roman Polanski. But for the young women in Manson's family, their guru was more than just a way to meet the stars.
He had a way of preaching to them. He would say things like, "Man invented time. There was never time before man invented it." And they would say, oh, he's brilliant. He came up with this. You know, they were kids. But it sounded very profound to them. And they became dedicated to him. They absolutely followed him.
For Squeaky, Spahn Ranch and the other Manson family haunts felt more like home than anywhere else she'd lived.
Her experience traveling with Manson and being part of that group was so much better than living in this dreary, frightening household in the suburbs, being treated as a wrongdoer by her father. For her, her life improved tremendously when she joined this group.
And at first, life on the ranch was not so different from other counterculture communes. It meant taking countless acid trips together and experimenting with group sex. But in the era of free love, Manson was using sex and drugs to control and dominate.
He basically slept with whoever, you know, you either told to or wanted to. You know, our bodies weren't our own.
He'd go on trips with them all the time, either taking no LSD himself or a smaller dosage than they would so he could retain more control over his mental faculties. And he'd dig down deep into their psyche during these trips and try to remove many of their convictions on life.
To Barbara Hoyt, a 17-year-old runaway, life in the Manson family seemed like an eye-opening game, and the goal was to distort reality.
Life at Spahn's Ranch was a quote-unquote magical mystery tour. Every day was a different thing. We dressed different, we played it, we lived on a movie set.
And one thing we didn't have is watches, and the whole idea was to let time disappear. There was no time. We were all living now.
Everybody had a role. Leslie was one of Manson's front street girls, the prettier women he used to attract men. Squeaky was the Manson family's den mother.
She was very supportive to all of us. People in the family. She was a little bit maternal in how I related to her. She was a very nice, loving person. You'd never know.
And Quiet Pat was a good soldier. She helped keep everybody in line.
When everyone else became jumpy or they became nervous or something started going wrong and they were thinking, maybe this isn't where I want to be, well, then you can take them to me because I would make them somehow feel all right.
Volatile Susan Atkins, nicknamed Sadie, blindly and enthusiastically followed Charlie.
Charlie would say something like to Sadie, "Go get me a coconut, and I don't care if you have to go clear to Jamaica to do it." And she'd get up and she'd start out the door and he'd say, "Never mind." And she would have done it. She would have gone clear to Jamaica. She had to get him a fresh coconut.
By the summer of 1969, Charles Tex Watson, one of Manson's few male followers, was giving the girls murder lessons under Manson's command. At first, it seemed like just another game.
He demonstrated how to stab a person. He told us, don't just stick the knife in and out. He said, bring it up when you cut someone so that you cut up more stuff. And he made us practice.
Slowly, the mood turned to paranoia. Increasingly, a common goal emerged: giving up individual ego to take on Manson's will. The family listened as he compared himself to Jesus Christ and the devil.
Sometimes he would reenact the crucifixion when we were on LSD. And it was very realistic and it was hard to watch.
You had them thinking you were Jesus Christ. How did you do that?
Just being myself. All men are Jesus Christ.
They are?
Sure.
Manson also began to ask for bizarre tests of devotion.
I'd stand up against a tree and he'd throw knives at me. He's thrown hatchets at people. Do you trust me? Do you love me enough? You know, stand up against that tree. And he asked us constantly, each one of us, you know, will you die for me? Will you be my finger on a hand? Will you be me?
So, did you want to be like him?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did all of you want to be like him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Manson's talk was growing darker, and he claimed an apocalyptic racial revolution was at hand. He called it Helter Skelter, after the Beatles song. He said the race riots and black militancy of the 60s were just the beginning. According to Manson, Helter Skelter would clear the way for the family to run the country. But as the summer of 1969 wore on, Manson became convinced they would have to ignite it themselves.
We started to have a lot more guns at the ranch and knives, and people were on lookouts. We were pretty much all running on definite fears.
The first Manson family murder took place in late July 1969. The victim was a musician named Gary Hinman. The killers were people Hinman knew, family members Susan Atkins, Bobby Beausoleil, and Manson himself. It was Manson who sliced off Hinman's ear, and Bobby who stabbed him to death.
I had to take the gun away from the guy. The guy shot off on the wall, and I cut his ear off, and I took the gun, and I gave it to the kid. I said, here. I said, now I got to kill this fool. He said, oh, don't kill me, don't kill me. I said, all right, are you going to tell the parole officer I cut your ear off? He said, no. And Bobby killed him and stabbed him in the heart, and he died. There's your heart, girl. There's your heart, Frenchie. There's your wine, Beausoleil.
Susan Atkins left a gruesome signature. On the walls of Hinman's home, she scrawled the words, political piggy, in his blood. When he was found, no one knew the murder of this anonymous hippie was just a dress rehearsal for what would come 10 days later. August 8th, 1969 began like any other day at Spahn Ranch outside Los Angeles. By now, Charles Manson and his family were looking less like a hippie commune and more like a bloodthirsty cult. Some members had already committed one murder in the name of Helter Skelter, a music teacher named Gary Hinman. Now Manson made it clear there would have to be another, more shocking crime.
Charlie came and woke me up, and he said, get up. I want you to go somewhere.
Manson also rounded up 3 other family members, Charles Tex Watson, Susan Sadie Atkins, and Linda Kasabian.
He said, get in the car. And he said, do everything the Tex says. And we were off.
Former family member Barbara Hoyt remembers that night as the night that Susan Atkins asked her to run a special errand.
Charlie was there, and he wanted to know why I was there, and I said because Sadie had called the back of the ranch and wanted 3 sets of dark clothes, and he said they already left.
Charlie didn't explain where they went, but Barbara heard it from a ranch hand.
He had asked Sadie, where are you guys going? And she leaned out of the car window and said, we're going to go kill some mother effing pigs.
The group was headed to Los Angeles, to the home of a record producer Manson once visited.